Oh my goodness, does anybody in the NFC or in the AFC want Baker Mayfield? The Rams are looking at a season where they're playing the toughest schedule around and we're getting ready for it to break. And I'm going to introduce the 16 of 22 rule. It's my rule. And appreciation for what's going on with the Rams tight ends these days. Also, we want to remember Phil Olsen and Leroy Jones. Good afternoon, live from the Ram Cave. I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the May 6th, 2022 edition. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff to get into. There's always stuff to talk about. I'm always amazed when someone says there's nothing to talk about. And yeah, I go into nerd spasm, but before I go into nerd spasm, I just wanted to touch on some things that I kept seeing popping up all over the place. Everyone's all talking about Troy Aikman and Joe Buck going to ESPN. I could not be more thrilled. Actually, as a Southern Californian, your requirement to live here as a sports fan is you have to hate Joe Buck. Joe Buck's not my favorite, but Troy Aikman drives me crazy as a color guy. And so I'm happy as heck for him to move to ESPN, where I really don't have to hear him too often because I'm going to see the Rams on Fox and likely on Sunday Night Football. The sad part about Sunday Night Football is Al Michaels is gone. And I wish Al Michaels could, and I'm not, who's it, JB Long, that's the Ram broadcaster. I wish Al Michaels could call every game. I'm a big Al Michaels fan. But growing up with Dick Enberg, Al Wisk, and Bob Starr, I'm really hard to please. Of course, Chick Hearn, Vince Scully, the legendary that no one talks about, Bob Miller for the hockey, for the NHL Kings here. I'm kind of hard to please, but I saw the news talking today. Everyone's getting all excited about Troy Aikman and Joe Buck going to ESPN, and I sooner go to a yawning festival. All right. The word is right now that nobody seems to want Baker Mayfield. And I caught part of Colin Kaepernick's show as I was driving around this morning. And he was talking about how, Jay Cutler got another chance. And Jay Cutler got another chance. And Jeff George had multiple chances because those guys weren't blue collar talents. They were elite talents with 5-cent attitudes. Jay Cutler, just was not easy to be around. Jeff George later on has come back and said the light went on about 11 years into his career when nobody wanted him anymore. It came on that he had been kind of a douche. But Jeff George and Jay Cutler were elite talents. The reason Baker Mayfield is struggling is some of his attitude, but it's also because he's a blue collar guy and he's not an elite talent. And no one's going to put up with all the stuff for a blue collar guy, right? Do you think Case Keenum would be still working in the NFL if he was had all the baggage with him, all the talk and everything? No, he's a blue collar guy, puts his hard hat on, goes to work every day, keeps his mouth shut, and is a good teammate. Baker Mayfield might be a good teammate, but he is always opening his mouth, and he opens it far too much for somebody with limited ability. And he's got ability, but he's not Jay Cutler. He's not Jeff George. He's not a lot of quarterbacks in this league. There's a reason Tim Tebow didn't get more shots. Now, you'll hear the people say, well, it's all about winning in this league. All Tim Tebow did was win. And if he had just played out the string, by the end of 2013, his career would have been over because he couldn't keep doing what he was doing. But he had no arm talent. He had really zero arm talent. And you had to build an entire thing around him where to be successful, and you would have been building for a 2-year window. And so that's why Tim Tebow, besides all the other stuff, I think the media generated the circus around Tim Tebow more than Tim Tebow did. Colin Kaepernick is another one. Very athletic, had a strong arm, but he didn't have an elite arm in the sense that it was a talented arm. The reason he's not working today, yes, partly because of what his stuff was, couldn't keep his own mouth shut, couldn't keep his girlfriend's mouth shut, trashed people. And on top of that, people forget he lost his job to Blaine Gabbert. Had a strong arm, but he didn't have elite arm talent. He didn't have Jay Cutler or Jeff George arm talent. It's not about how far you can throw the ball. You've seen that with Matthew Stafford. It's what you can do with it. And he never improved. He was always a one read, one run guy. And so the other thing is that he just didn't get better after his Super Bowl run. And he's not worth the baggage. He's just not worth it. So we move on. there's a reason I think Baker Mayfield's career is in real trouble. He's going to have to openly, loudly humble himself and be willing to take a job and then step in for somebody that gets hurt. I'll tell you where's an interesting place right now is as concerns will get raised about Trey Lance. Now, I'm not saying the 49ers are going to move off Trey Lance, but they have to move Jimmy G because Jimmy G's expensive, right? Jimmy G costs a lot of money, and he's not going to be your starting quarterback because you got to sign Deebo Samuel, and you got other cap issues. So you got to move Jimmy G, but there's all kinds of stuff leaking. It was leaking out about 2 weeks ago that there's some issues about Trey Lance not grasping everything right away. There was some news today that where it's kind of leaking out, he's not grasping it all. And so there's an issue here. And so the 49ers might be in the market, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy. They might be in the market for a good backup quarterback. Now, if Baker Mayfield had his head on straight, now he's going to make 19 rocks this year, but Jimmy G is making about 27, I think, 26. They need to move him. They have to move him to do all the things they want to do and make everybody happy under the cap, Deebo Samuel. But if I'm a Baker Mayfield, a guy that goes to a running offense, I'm looking at San Francisco, and that might be a place that if I kept my mouth shut, if I was a good citizen, he's not going to. It's not going to happen. But that would be a place he could fit in as a caddy, as a backup to Trey Lance if Trey Lance doesn't make it. I like Trey Lance. I think Trey Lance has a shot. He just hasn't played a lot of football. But I'm not even proposing that's a trade. But it's a place where Baker Mayfield could flourish. A strong running team, elite defense. It's kind of like what he had in Cleveland. And yet he's got to humble himself. It's not about whether or not he can play football. It's the fact that he's a blue-collar talent and he's not worth the effort and all the drama that comes with him. And I thought that was interesting, especially when you look at Seattle doesn't want him. And Seattle's ready to go to war, speaking about the NFC West, with Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Good luck with all that. And there's people down next year that are going to be in the draft that they might be eyeing. As I said before, Seattle has a window that looks like it's 2024, 2025 if all these draft picks pan out and they had a real good draft. But they're not going anywhere, right? And we've already had our conversation about Arizona. And so you got Seattle, Arizona, and Frisco, all with little issues here, even before you bring in, an idea of bringing in a Baker Mayfield, that there's that the Rams have a great change of things happening in the NFC West, where as they're playing the toughest schedule in the NFL, they're playing we don't know the actual order of games, but we know it's going to be hard because they got the NFC West. But the NFC West is in some chaos right now. The problem is they got the AFC West coming in, and they do get three, according to the schedule that I'm seeing, they get three AFC West teams at home. Denver, obviously the Chargers, and Las Vegas, but they have to go to Arrowhead. And those are all going to be tough games. But the AFC West is the SEC of the NFL. It's brutal. Also on the schedule are Buffalo, Dallas, Green Bay, and Tampa. Tampa, come on, we beat Tampa here, we beat Tampa there. Wherever Tampa wants to go, we'll beat them. Green Bay is scheduled to be in Lambeau, and as people are rightly talking, it's about when's that game going to be scheduled? September? All right. December? I don't know if I want to go to Green Bay in December. Do you want to go to Green Bay in December? Maybe for Christmas, but not to win a football game. The Buffalo and Dallas games are slated to be at SoFi. So while it's a tough schedule, it's nice to know the Rams won't have to go to Buffalo, which can be brutal, as we know. So that's some of the stuff going around the NFL. Yesterday, I posted a list of in regards to Tyler Higbee. I noticed that in my Rams Almanac that I have, that I'm actually comprising. It's not necessarily a Rams Almanac for purchase. Hey, maybe I can make it for purchase. That yesterday was a day they acquired Henry Childs back in 1981, and I broke that down. That's on from the Ram Cave at joetarosian.com. But as you look at the Rams tight ends over the years, and I'm thinking mostly modern era from 1969 forward. That was the year they drafted Bob Klein out of USC. The Rams have never had that elite next level tight end. Pat Curran, Bob Klein, Charlie Young was one early in his career, but he was never one with the Rams. Terry Nelson, David Hill, Mike Barber, Roland Williams was on the Greatest Show on Turf team. Early 90s, Troy Drayton. I really liked the hands of Pete Holohan. Didn't like the hands of Jared Cook, Damone Johnson, but most of these guys were blockers, bad hands, or just not anything really elite. I didn't even mention Victor Hicks, Walt Arnold, Jim Price, and some of those guys. And then Joe Kloffenstein, right? That weird draft pick the Rams had about 15 years ago. So when you think about it and you add it up in terms of Rams football and Rams tight ends, Tyler Higbee is really ranking high on this list, if not number one on this list as Rams tight ends. I think someone said, hey, what about Billy Truax from the 1960s? Okay, maybe Billy Truax, he had time with the Cowboys, but that should eliminate him because he had time with the Cowboys. But really, in our lifetime, in this modern era, the Super Bowl era, Tyler Higbee, great blocker, underrated blocker. I don't think people realized how good of a blocker he was until he went out. And also a pretty solid tight end for the Rams since being drafted in 2016. Name somebody else. I mean, he survived Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett was more talented, immensely talented. He's now with the Chargers. But it was Tyler Higbee they decided to extend. And that's because he's a little more complete as a player. But I'd be open to what anyone wants to say in terms of who's the best Rams tight end of all time. And Tyler Higbee's kind of got to be high on that list, if not number one, in terms of overall production. Some of these guys were better. David Hill might have been the best blocking tight end we ever had, along with Klein. But we're talking about overall production. Okay, I'm going to advance a theory here. It's a new theory. It's revolutionary. My new theory is 16 of 22. If you can get 16 of 22, you will win a Super Bowl. So what is 16 of 22? 16 of 22 is 16 of your 22 starters, 11 on offense, 11 on defense. We'll skip special teams and kickers and punters and long snappers. But if you can get 16 of your 22 starters through the draft, you're going to win a Super Bowl. That's my new theory, right? How about that? I came up with a new theory. I got my own theory. It's the 16 of 22. Everyone thinks of the Rams as free agent guys and trade guys. And if you look at it, yeah, Ramsey, Stafford, Bobby Wagner, free agent, Allen Robinson, free agent, A'Shaun Robinson, free agent, Justin Hollins off the waiver wire. He's not a glitzy guy, but he's slated to be a starter. The other 16 starters for the Rams have all been drafted. Try that on for size, huh? I think the theory of Rams football and the motto of 16 of 22 is much similar to what they say with the TV show, like 6 seasons in a movie. For the Rams, it's 4 years and a comp pick, right? Get 16 of your 22 starters through the draft, those mid-round levels. And remember, this is without a first-round pick and very few second-round picks. And if you can get 16 of 22, then you can get 4 years and a comp pick out of all these guys, right? And that's kind of neat when you look at it. Rams running backs. We're not going to mention Kyrie Williams, but Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson is a free agent after this year. 4 years and a comp pick. Each one of those guys, if Cam Akers keeps on the same trajectory, they'll get a second contract, but someplace else. Cooper Kupp, drafted, not going anywhere. Van Jefferson, Sean Jefferson's son, drafted, could be on the move. Who knows with Van Jefferson, but 4 seasons and a comp pick, right? Ben Skoranek, maybe not so much, but draft pick. Tutu Atwell, draft pick. Jacob Harris, draft pick. Tyler Higbee, draft pick. Bryson Hopkins, not in the starting lineup, but played in the Super Bowl, draft pick. Noteboom, Edwards, Allen, Evans, Havenstein, all draft picks. Logan Bruss, draft pick. Tremaine Ingram, draft pick. If some of these guys develop, if David Edwards develops or has another good year and he decides to walk, 4 years and a comp pick. Aaron Donald, of course. Greg Gaines, 4 years and a comp pick. Bobby Brown's a draft pick, and he's got to be figuring into the rotation this year. Terrell Lewis, Chris Garrett, Ernest Brown IV, Daniel Hardy, draft picks, and they're behind Leonard Floyd and Justin Hollins. Terrell Lewis is getting to the point where he could be 4 years and a draft pick and a comp pick, but he's got to get a little more time on the field and stay healthy. Traven Howard, draft pick. Ernest Jones, draft pick. Rams cornerback room right now looks like Jalen Ramsey trade. Troy Hill, undrafted free agent, signed with the Browns. No, signed with Cincy originally. came to the Rams in 2016 and then left after 2020. He's returned, but he was an undrafted guy. But David Long Jr., Robert Rochelle, Jacoby Durant, Darian Kendrick, all draft picks. Expect David Long could be four seasons and a comp pick, right? Now, the other interesting thing about this, too, is look at the Rams room, and this is the ultimate in my 16 of 22. The Rams have 6 safeties in the safety room, right? 6 safeties. Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, Taylor Rapp, Terrell Burgess, Quentin Lake, now Russ Yeast. This entire safety room is all drafted by the Rams. No free agents, no trades. It just tells you what the Rams do is bring them in, bring them out. Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, 6th round, 7th round draft picks. Quentin Lake, Russ Yeast, 6th round, 2nd round draft picks. Taylor Rapp, 2nd round draft pick. Terrell Burgess, 3rd round draft pick. And right now, Taylor Rapp, Terrell Burgess, they're getting awful close to that place where it's going to be a Rapp maybe is in his walk year, 4 seasons and a comp pick. Terrell Burgess. Now, of course, these guys are going to have to play a little bit better, but we've also noticed that the league seems to take a special interest in Rams players that they've developed. Gerald Everett, Morgan Fox, Troy Hill, right? These guys, they Ogo Okoronkwo, Samson Ibukam. These guys have all Johnny Johnson players the Rams developed from those middle rounds. They end up earning a comp pick. Interesting note about Russ Yeast that I saw on Rams Wire this morning. This isn't unique to Joe T. I saw this on Rams Wire. Is Russ Yeast has completed 2 degrees while at the University of Kansas State. Isn't that awesome? 2 degrees. So you got to know his head is right. This guy gets up and goes to work every day. He's dedicated and he's smart. No one sounds more like a 4 years and a comp pick guy to me than Russ Yeast. So really fascinating with the Rams. That's my 16 of 22 theory kind of broken down. 16 of 22, 4 years and a comp pick. And I know it's just going to take the nation by storm, but we'll give it time. And I'm not talking about Matt Gay, Riley Dixon, or Matt Orzek. All right, real quick here as we hit the 17-minute mark on this date in history. The Rams sent as a free agent. He was a free agent. It was kind of like a sign and trade. That Phil Olsen ended up going to the Denver Broncos. It's ambiguous right there. I think it was kind of like a sign and trade. It was on this date in 1975. Phil Olsen was, of course, Merlin Olsen's brother, and they actually started alongside of each other in 71, 72. By the time 73, 74 rolled around, Olsen was behind his brother and Larry Brooks. He wasn't playing past Larry Brooks, but great size, good special team player, played a little center. He was 6'5", 265, great size for the NFL in the early 70s. He was signed by the Broncos or went to the Broncos, and as compensation, the Rams got a 3rd round pick, a 6th round pick, and the rights to wide receiver Otto Stowe. That's a great name from the past, and we don't need to get into Otto Stowe today, but he really didn't play for the Rams, and the 3rd and 6th round picks didn't amass too much for the Rams. Olsen played a couple years in Denver, 75, 76, shined on their special teams, and then stepped away in 77. He missed their Super Bowl year. They traded his rights to Buffalo, got hurt. He didn't play again. The interesting thing about Olsen, besides being Merlin's brother, was that he was the 4th overall player taken in the 70 draft by the Patriots, but missed that season when he suffered an injury in the college all-star game. Now, a lot of people don't, what do you mean college all-star game? Like the Hula Bowl, Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, Blue-Gray game? No. There used to be a game that the college all-stars played the Super Bowl champions or an NFL team. I think it was the Super Bowl champions. And that lasted up through at least 1975, I think. And in fact, I remember the last one played, it was at Soldier Field, and there was a rainstorm, and I think there was lightning, and they called the game off somewhere in the middle of the second half or in the 4th quarter. Doesn't make any difference. But Olsen was injured in that 1970 game. 4th overall pick, injured in that game. The idea of their 4th overall pick playing this year in an all-star game, a meaningless all-star game before reporting to his team and playing it down in the NFL is just egregious. It's crazy. But that was the case, and that had a profound effect on Olsen's career. 3 severe knee injuries curtailed his career. He had played about 6 seasons, didn't amount to much, except that his last name is Olsen. Also on this day, really interesting, the Rams signed a defensive end named Leroy Jones, 6'8", 263, big dude. If you're a Charger fan, you might remember Leroy Jones. He went to Norfolk State, and after the '73 season, he wanted to, going into the '73 season, he wanted to play football, and he walked away from Norfolk State and signed with the Edmonton Eskimos of the CFL. So he left school early, and he wasn't eligible for the NFL draft in '74. So he was drafted by the Rams in 1975, but he was still under contract in the CFL and had to finish that season in Edmonton. He joined the Rams in 1976. He signed his contract on this day in 1976. He was taken by the Rams in 1975, second round, 48th overall. And really, man, great size. That was the era of Ed Too Tall Jones, the giant John Matuzak, the really tall defensive ends that were coming in. And while they had an advantage in terms of the passing game and maybe getting the quarterback a little bit, they also suffered because they were really tall and didn't have a lot of leverage. So the Rams liked him. He was with the team throughout camp. But you got to remember, in 1976, you had Jack Youngblood and Fred Dreyer. There was no room for him. So they ended up trading him to the Chargers as camp broke in September of '76, and they got about $12,000 cash. I looked it up, and a second-round pick, number 50 overall in the 1977 draft. That player was Billy Waddy that the Rams took. Jones went on to start for 7 years, 8 years in San Diego, 7 years as a starter at defensive end, was all-pro 1 year. I think 1980, had 12 and a half sacks. He died last year at the age of 70. But Jones was a player that I remember him being in camp, and it was like, oh, they got rid of Leroy Jones. And, you fall in love with these guys during preseason. They all got that Nelson spruce to them, even in the prehistoric days. And then they dealt him. And then, of course, he's down in San Diego, and you forget that he was in Rams camp. I remember, I was a nerd, 10, 11, 12 years old. But just for fun, I wanted to look back. And I've done this before, and you guys are going to get all nerded out. The Rams, the 1975 for the Rams draft in 1975 looked like this. And this is why a team projects 5 years, 6, 7 years into the future in terms of how well a draft plays out. Remember, the draft was like 17 rounds in those days. So everyone else, after a certain number was just camp fodder, even if they ever signed. But the Rams 1975 draft was number 9 overall. They drafted Mike Fanning out of Notre Dame. Solid prehistoric version of Michael Brockers. White guy out of Notre Dame, bald, not good looking, not sexy. But Mike Fanning was a real steady player. His problem was he played alongside Jack Youngblood, Fred Dreyer, Merlin Olsen, Larry Brooks, and Cody Jones. So he was always looking for time. And he was with the Rams for about 7 years. Had a couple of nice seasons, believe it or not, in Detroit and Seattle with Chuck Knox in '84 before calling it a career. Actually, the funny thing about Mike Fanning was, I mentioned it last year, is he had a career that was really good. It was kind of like Michael Brockers, another number 1 pick, and they were both traded to Detroit. I thought that was really interesting, and that was Mike Fanning. Number 11, Dennis Herrera, All-Pro. Number 20, Doug France. We just talked about him earlier, All-Pro. Number 28, forgotten name, Monty Jackson, All-Pro. The 48th overall, we just talked about Leroy Jones, and he was turned into Billy Waddy. The number 61 pick didn't really make it in the NFL, but his name was Jeff Reese. He was an offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman, guard center. And he was traded in 1977 to the Seattle Seahawks for the number 31 overall pick. And that was Nolan Cromwell. Rod Perry was drafted number 98, and at number 176, Pat Hayden. Now, Pat Hayden may not be our most favorite of all quarterbacks, but the guy became a starter for the Rams, led them to the playoffs, led them to 2 NFC championship games. Also, although it wasn't pretty, he's the guy that won the game in Dallas in 1976. So amen and hallelujah, Pat Hayden. We could forget about him as athletic director at USC, but let's just remember and be grateful. Anytime a quarterback beats Dallas, they're always going to be in my cool book. But that's a bunch of starters that also, Dennis Herrera, Doug France, Rod Perry, Nolan Cromwell, Billy Waddy. They all played key parts in the Rams Super Bowl run in 1979 at Super Bowl 14. Wanted to get that out, my little nerd spasm for the day. Speaking of Leroy Jones, though, I did have this thought cross me, and hey, I'm still small potatoes, and I don't want to upset anybody that is clicking on. So I say thank you to my subscribers. If you're watching this for the first time, please continue to subscribe, like your friends too. But I'm beginning to feel the need, because of proximity, because they share the same house, is maybe mentioning a little more about the Bolts, the Chargers, and because there's so many Raider fans in LA, just doing brief mentions, not doing breakdowns. I'm not going to have nerd spasms on the Chargers and the Raiders, but just doing constant updates, kind of like I do a little bit with the NFC West, and tossing an update or two. If you think that's cool, great. If you don't think that's cool, just say nay and I won't do it. But 99% of my content will be Rams football, and we'll build from there. All righty. Hey, I'm Joe Tarosian, and I didn't do my commercial yet. Yes, I am a writer, sports writer, pastor of a small church in Burbank, and I also wrote several novels. My high school football novel, Tangent Dreams, is seeming to have a second life all of a sudden. I guess I could say thank you to you folks. This came out about 6 years ago. You could read the reviews on it. It did really well, and I'd like it to do well again. That would be great. I don't do Patreon. I don't do anything else. Like I said, I'm small potatoes, but this is how I support myself, and if you guys can give it a shot, give it a shot. I'd love to talk about it, and we'll go from there. You can find me at JoeT13B on Twitter, Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and follow me at joetarosian.com. All right, folks, thank you so much for clicking on, and we will see you on Monday. Take care.